Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today, Jamf Connect, the easiest way to manage identity on the Mac. My name is Jim, and I'm getting us kicked off today. We've got an awesome presentation lined up. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter today, Jamf's Director of Nomad and Jamf Connect, Joel Rennick.
Thank you very much, Jim. Very excited to be here. This is my first webinar that we've done as a Jamf employee. As you may know, used to be running a company called Orchard and Grove, where we created a couple of products all under the kind of Nomad name. Those are now all part of Jamf and more specifically part of Jamf Connect. So we're very excited to kind of talk about this. We've got a couple of great things today. Real quick, we want to go over kind of Nomad and open source. And then go into Jamf Connect, so you can see some of the features that we have, the products that we're using and things like that. And then finally, if you were watching any of the kind of live feed from the Jamf conference, JNUC, that we just did a few weeks ago, we showed some really cool stuff that we're doing with Azure. And so I want to actually do kind of a live demo here of some of the Azure beta stuff that we have. So with that as our kind of quick agenda, I'd like to kind of move in to cover a bit of the open source first. So many years ago, actually it wasn't that many years ago, it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we started developing a product called Nomad. Nomad stood for No More Active Directory, and it was designed to allow Mac users to more easily utilize Active Directory without having to worry about some of the not so nice pieces of the experience. So we had two products, Nomad and then Nomad Login, which was a login window plugin to allow you to authenticate at the login window as an Active Directory user without having to be bound or without having to create mobile accounts. Both of these products are still out there. They're still open source. They're still being updated. So nothing has changed with either of these two. So if you're already users of Nomad or Nomad Login, please continue to use them. We've got a new Nomad Login beta that we're just releasing here, probably a little bit later today once we get done with this webcast. So in addition to being still open source and still supported, you can still find them on GitLab, get all the source code. We've got good communities in Slack. One of the new things that's happened since we've now become part of the Jamf family is that Jamf offers free chat support. So if you go to the Jamf marketplace and you look at Nomad, there's a way there that you can click on a link and you can actually chat with some of our Jamf support agents, our amazing support agents that can give you help for these products. It doesn't matter if you're a Jamf customer, it doesn't matter if you paid us anything. We really want to help you work with these and just make Active Directory that much less of an issue for you. We do have a paid support option for them as well. So if you do need that, we do have some options on that side. And then, our real goal here is that if you do have Active Directory and that's what you're working with today, we want to make it very simple because we want to kind of help you get to the next level where you're moving to some sort of cloud identity provider. And to that end, that's where we put a lot of the work into Jamf Connect. So Jamf Connect is our commercial offering focused around cloud identity. We offer support for Okta today, also smart cards. We'll briefly touch upon that before we get done here. But we're quickly moving into other identity providers. The big one being Azure, Microsoft Azure, also looking at Google Identity, OneLogin, Ping, and a few of the others. We want to have a very easy and simple way for you on the Mac to have an amazing experience with these identity providers and to be able to make it easier for your users to keep their passwords in sync, for you, the admin, to know what's going on, all that kind of stuff being done through here. So definitely we'll talk about that as we go through. So the focus is on single sign-on and cloud identity. And so with Jamf Connect, we've got an ability to both keep the password in sync. With Okta, we do this through some browser extensions, which I'll show you in a demo here in a little bit. And also at the login window. One of the major goals we had for this was to allow you to hand out Macs in kind of a zero-touch automated MDM enrollment environment. Have the user get the machine out of the box, turn it on, go through a very streamlined MDM enrollment, and then sign in with their Okta identity, complete with multi-factor. and then we'd create a local account based upon that username and password. So we'll show you that in action here in a little while. There's kind of three main components right now to Jamf Connect. There's Jamf Connect Login. So this is the login window authentication plugin to allow you to do Okta authentication at the login window. This is roughly analogous to Nomad Login, which is our open source authentication window plugin that works with Active Directory. We then have Jamf Connect Sync. This was formerly known as Nomad Pro. This is a menu bar item that allows you to sign into Okta and keep the password in sync between Okta and the local Mac. We also have another product, Jamf Connect PK and NIT, which is used for smart card authentication and getting Kerberos tickets from a smart card if you're in an Active Directory environment then. Requirements for the Jamf Connect suite, pretty simple, Mac OS 10.2 or later, which should cover pretty much most of what you're using. The cloud identity provider, currently it's Okta. We'll show you Azure here, which is in preview. And if you're interested in playing around, you can reach out to the Jamf Connect or the Jamf account teams, and we'll be able to work on there. So we already have some questions about some of the dep notify functionality, and we will show you some of that because that's already in the products as well. So keep those thoughts in mind when we get to the demo. We've hopefully got some cool stuff that we can show you there. You need an MDM provider or at least some way of getting these packages onto the machine. It's important to note Jamf Connect does not require Jamf Pro or Jamf Now. Jamf Connect can work with any MDM server. We've been very interested in keeping it MDM agnostic. We know some of you don't always have all the choices that you'd like to make for what you're using for your management system. And so for the most part, Jamf Connect is just a package. There's a license file, which is shipped as a configuration profile. And then there's the actual configuration of the packages themselves, which is also done via configuration profile. So as long as you have a method for getting packages onto the Mac and a configuration profile so you can set some of the preferences, you'll be able to use all of Jamf Connect. So hopefully it gives you a lot of functionality and flexibility without having to dictate much of what you're using on the back end, as I said, because sometimes that wasn't always your choice. So Jamf Connect Sync, which is where we're going to start. This is the application that lives in the menu bar, allows you to synchronize the password between Okta and the local system. It notifies the users on expiring passwords. We write out a lot of stuff to the preference file. So you can use extension attributes, for example, to read in who the user may be, because not always is the local account name the same as the Okta account name. So we're able to help you glue all of those back together. We've got browser extensions for Chrome and for Safari. We have one for Firefox, but not many people ask for that. And so we're happy to work with you on those. And that allows the user to have a very natural workflow where all they do is go to the browser, they go to Salesforce, Dropbox, whatever cloud service that they may be using. And instead of the Okta authentication window, you get RUI. We're able to use the password, validate the password against Okta, and then go back and validate the password locally. And that way we're able to make sure that the password's in sync and everything's the way that it should be. We also have some clever ways of kind of hopefully helping you do your job as an admin. In addition to doing the password synchronization, you can also do some customized menu items. So for example, we have easy ways to have you get to self-service if you're a Jamf customer. You can also open up ticketing systems. You have a lot of different functionality in there. So some good stuff there. This is kind of what it looks like. We'll show you in a little bit. It's very brandable, so that Jamf Connect logo you can replace with your own. We're not exactly proud of this, but that can be an animated GIF. So if you did want to put some motion into your images, you would be able to do that. So that's just kind of the splash screen that happens when you load up the system for the first time. That's what the menu kind of looks like. We'll show you that here in a little bit. As you can see, you've got to sign in, the ability to change password. That Get Software item will go back to Jamf Self-Service if you have it installed, or you can send it anywhere you want. Some places have it go to a web page for requesting software installations or something like that. There's a Get Help option down there. That allows you to go to any sort of path locally on the system, any sort of URL So a lot of times if you have like a web help desk or some other ticketing system, it can go straight there. Preferences and about, we'll show you that in a little bit. It's the sign-in window. You can change that logo as well, so that can be your own branding. Multi-factor, we handle pretty much all of the multi-factor options. So this is Okta Verify, which is probably the more common one, Google Authenticator, Duo, YubiKeys with the one-time password. We almost have some of the U2F functionality for the YubiKeys done as well. So we're working on that. Pretty much most of the ones that we've been asked for, we've been able to put in. If we don't support a multi-factor option that you'd like, please ask us, because usually it's pretty simple for us to add those. Browser extensions, again, for Chrome and for Safari, so you're able to use those. You can change the password directly in the app. We actually open up a little mini web browser that goes straight back to Okta. If you do have Kerberos or AD involved, all of the functionality of Nomad, where we could get you Kerberos tickets, is in this app. So we can actually change the password back through Kerberos, perhaps if you're AD mastered, and sometimes that's a little bit easier than having the user go through the Okta web interface to be able to do this. All the settings are managed, so it can be managed through a configuration profile. When you push that configuration profile through, again, your MDM server of choice, this will be grayed out the things that the user can't touch or can't edit. So real quick, like to kind of do a demo of this. So I move over to, got a VM here, which is running Mojave. And you can see that we've got the Jamf Connect menu up at the top. A couple of things about this. The icon in the menu bar, completely configurable. So if you want to brand this with your own corporate logo or something else like that, you're more than welcome to do that. We wanted to make this, since we've got this little bit of real estate here on the screen, we wanted to make sure that it was functional as kind of an admin tool and being able to work with the users and kind of make your life a little bit better. So any item that you see here in this menu can be hidden. It can also be changed as far as the language. So if sign in doesn't really work for your users, if instead they're expecting a corporate account or Okta sign in, you're going to be able to change that. That's all just done through a configuration profile. So it makes it very, very easy. We've got an actions menu here. This allows you to have whatever items, scripts, links, anything else that you want. When I open up this menu, you can see that there's some scripts behind the scenes that are automatically populating it with the IP address of the machine, the host name, and then I can even do a ping test to a particular host. And that can come back with a red and green little jelly bean there so that the user knows if the network is available and things like that. We find this is a really handy place to just put some kind of basic information so that when your users may be contacting the help desk, they have an easy way to kind of go through this and figure out what's going on here. If we look at the preferences really quick, you can see it's pretty basic. We've got about 20 or 30 things that you can set here. We've got about another 30 or 50 things that you can do from the preference file itself. We didn't want to overload the UI and make it overly complicated. But effectively, all that you need to do is punch in your Okta domain. There's no changes that are required on the Okta side. We use the Okta Authentication API, which is already turned on. So it makes it very simple for you to kind of navigate. Happy to chat with security folks because we've gone through a lot of those things in the first place. So we have a question about the user that we're using here. This particular account, JC Admin, this is a local user that we have to kind of represent one of the workflows that you may be dealing with, which is the idea that you have existing users out in the wild and you just want to add some authentication on top of them. Very shortly, we'll show you the actual login window here as we go through it. So the basic use of this, one way that you can do this is you can just do a sign in. Again, you can brand this all to your own. We can save the password in the keychain if you let us, otherwise we won't. The user can pick which browser that they want to have this in, and they can just hit sign in. This will do an authentication back to Okta. It'll get a session token, and then it'll open up their Okta dashboard within that browser. At the same time, after the authentication to Okta was done, we can actually validate that the local password is the same. So if you go back up here to preferences, all that is just a checkbox to sync the local password. If the password in Okta is not the same as the password locally, we'll force the user to update their local password before we give them that Okta session token. When we do this, we of course update File Vault, the keychain, and then the actual account password itself. So all three of those pieces come together. Down here, you can see a number of Kerberos pieces where you're able to use all of this. And we can go out and reach out to your Active Directory environment with the same password and username that you have for Okta, and then get a Kerberos ticket for the user. If your usernames are different between Active Directory and with Okta, not a problem. We'll be able to authenticate you with a different username as well. We can even ask the user for what that is. So with this all functioning and with some of the browser plugins in, I'm going to move over to Chrome here. The Chrome extension that we have is on the Chrome store. And with the extensions in place for both Safari and for Chrome, all you have to do is type in an actual Okta authenticated page, and our window will show up. And you can see here that we're actually getting prompted for the local password because I've set that. So this is one of the things that you can do. So if I go in and I turn that off, let's go back to preferences, undo sync local password. We'll quit out of Chrome and kind of show you this from the beginning again. So if I open up Chrome, the workflow that we wanted to give the users is that they didn't really have to change anything locally. All they had to do is go about their normal day, and instead of authenticating in the web view, we would pop up our own UI, we blank the authentication page behind them, and then we take them directly to that location that they wanted to go to. So we make this very, very simple, and in the meantime, we check that the password is synced, and if not, we block the user from getting to that resource on the network. So with that really quick overview of Jamf Connect Sync, we have trials available so you can download it, use it for a couple of weeks, kind of kick the tires, get a good feel for it, and then decide if it kind of works in your environment or not. So with that, I'm going to move back to our slides here. A little bit about the AD integration. Since we know a lot of Okta accounts are Kerberos, or excuse me, AD mastered, we then have the ability to get those Active Directory tickets. And so pull that in. With those tickets, we're able to get access to web pages, SMB shares, and things like that. So we'll be able to work with that. And again, like I said before, the AD username can be different from the Okta username. So with that, I kind of like moved the a little bit of the discussion over here to Jamf Connect Login. So this is our Jamf, or our login window authentication plugin. And a couple important things here. This does not replace the login window. Apple's login window is still fully functional. We don't change how the authentication actually happens. What we have is using the Apple public APIs, we put a plugin into the login window that shows our particular UI. So this will allow you to authenticate into Okta in the particular case that I show you. We have Azure working already, and that's going to be the last part of this demonstration. But we also have this working for Google Identity, for Ping, for OneLogin, and for a few others. So if you're one of those, if that's what you're using for your identity provider, please reach out to your Jamf rep, and we'd love to get a conversation started. Azure will probably out the beginning of January, so we're just looking at a couple weeks from now, but the rest will shortly follow, and I expect to have login windows for all of those other identity providers probably by the beginning of February, if not sooner. So if you are interested in some of those, let your Jamf rep know, because we should be having some betas of those applications as well, so you have a good understanding of how this fits together. So with this plugin and with being at the login window, we've got some really cool things that we can do. In addition to allowing you to brand the login window, which some people are very excited about, we can also do some fun stuff like show EULAs, show progress bars, and things like that as the user goes through these. We can enable the accounts for File Vault. You don't even have to reboot the machine. So our perfect onboarding experience is to get a Mac out of the box, go through the automated MDM enrollment. The user answers very little questions, and we'll show you this kind of whole DEP workflow in a little bit, because we've suppressed all of those through the MDM service. They get to the login window, they sign in with their cloud identity, then we kind of go through an onboarding and a provisioning exercise for them at that point. And we can enable File Vault as they sign in so that they don't have to then check it, re-sign, sign out and do anything along those lines. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is with Okta. With Azure and the others, which I'll show you in a little bit as well, it's more of a web view that you see. It's a little bit different API that we have to work with using a SAML OpenID Connect operation as opposed to the Okta Authentication API that we have here. But again, that logo is completely configurable, so you'll be able to go through that. We authenticate the account against your cloud provider. We can authenticate them locally as well if we need to. We've got a couple of different options on that. Then we can change passwords. We can reset passwords. We can do some sort of MFA enrollment if you need. All of that can be done at the login window. Our goal is to be able to support a brand new user at your organization who may not have any personal devices, who may not have a phone, who may not have anything with them other than the laptop that you have just given to them. And so we want them to be able to reset their passwords, set up their accounts, do all of that through the login window, and then sign them in with those cloud identities. So we show you that a little bit more. We can, when we're verifying the password for Okta, for example, we can actually pull in the password policy for Okta, make sure that it meets the complexity requirements before we allow them to actually change the password. Multi-factor authentication. Again, with Okta, we handle all the popular ones. With Azure, Google, and the rest, we'll handle all the MFA as well. So very well aware of that. We know that you have that. We want you to very much be able to use that. So now let me show you the login window. So here we are, and we'll go back down here to the system preferences, users and groups, and you can see that I've just got this JC admin account here. So in this case, we've got an environment where we've already had somebody sign in, but we'll kind of replicate the functionality that we have going on here. So I'm just going to move out to the login window. You can see here that we now have a branded login window. This is also a GIF that can be animated. So if you want to make it move and things like that, you can. You can also change this background. By default, it's just gray to keep it kind of plain and neutral. However, if you'd like to put an image there or something else, you're more than welcome to do that. Down here, we have a little help button. In this particular case, this can take you straight to your Okta tenant. So here's where a user could reset a password, could change a password, enroll MFA, do a number of things that they may need to do before they could actually sign into the Mac. We're just going to hit done on that and move down here. So once the user signs in here, we authenticate them back to Okta using the Authentication API. If MFA is required, we'll then have them do that, and I can show you this. Once the user's been created, we create a local account, and by default, we won't go back to the network again. However, for lab environments, for more secure environments, we do have an option that you can turn always on network authentication. So we would only allow users in if they could authenticate back to Okta, back to Azure, back to whatever cloud identity provider that you're using. It's really great for some of those more secure environments, but maybe it's not as exciting for when you're on a plane or on a laptop and you can't connect in. So that's where we have an option where we can always prefer a network authentication so that if MFA is required, the user will have to go through that. However, if the network is not available, we can actually fall back to a local authentication. So I'm going to sign in here as another account. And if I remember my password, I'm going to sign in. Beautiful. My password is correct. So it's letting me choose which push mechanism I want to do. I'm going to do an Okta push. So now my phone just buzzed, and if I hit approve on my phone, I've now been authenticated, and it's now going to take me through the login process. One of the fun things we have our own EULA screen as part of the login window. So if you want to have a EULA that the user actually has to specifically agree to, as opposed to just hitting the return button, we can support that. All of this is done through a configuration profile. So it's very easy to set this text, to change it, to do whatever you want. I'm going to hit done. And then you're going to see this is our progress bar that we can show at the login window. Because we're in a great environment here where we're root. We can do things under the covers. The user hasn't gone to the Finder yet. So we can run a script of your choosing, which can maybe pull triggers in Jamf, your MDM server of choice, install packages, do whatever needs to be done before the user is actually authenticated and signed into the machine. So this is a really nice way of allowing some functionality and to do some customization in here. And so now at this point, we're just creating a brand new local account for the user. With Okta, we can determine whether the user is an admin or not based upon settings within Okta. We can do the same for Azure and the other cloud identity providers as well. Our goal here is that all of your identity management comes from the identity provider that you're using. And you can see Jamf Connect has already started here. We weren't using a configuration profile with that authentication domain, so we'd be able to set the settings here and do the rest. We can hand off the password from the login window to Jamf Connect Sync, so the user doesn't actually have to sign in again. So we've got a lot of nice kind of fit and finish that we can put together here for you to make that user experience as simple and as easy as possible. So our goal is all of your configuration for the applications, for the login window, for what logo to use and things like that, that comes from your MDM server, ideally via configuration profiles. For the art, for your logos and things like that, maybe it's a package, an installer package with a few things. However, for your identity, all of your identity comes from your cloud identity provider. So in this case, we'll be able to determine whether a user can sign in or not based upon groups and some other settings that you can put into your cloud identity provider. We can also make the user an admin or non-admin based upon roles from the SAML token that we can get. So we have some really, I think, very interesting ways of allowing you to do all of that management from a remote service, from one that you already have, without having to necessarily need another pane of glass. So with that, I want to go back in here, real quickly touch upon Jamf Connect PK init. So this is the third part of the Jamf Connect suite. So Jamf Connect Sync, which currently works with Okta, menu bar item, does the authentication and the password synchronization. Jamf Connect Login, currently with Okta as well. That's what you just saw here in the demo, allows you to have that authentication plugin at the login window. Third part of it, you get all of the pieces, whether you're going to need them or not, is Jamf Connect PK init, which works with smart cards and allows you to do Kerberos authentication with smart cards, password synchronization, and a couple of other of those things. So cool. All right, pricing, $24 per device per year, $2 per month. You get access to all the Jamf Connect applications, includes Jamf Connect standard support. So you get that with you. We want to very much make sure that you're having a good experience. You're able to do the configuration and things like that. Again, there is no requirement to have a Jamf Pro, Jamf Now server. Everything is being done with packages and then configuration profiles. Availability is today. We support Okta currently, and in a few moments here, I'm going to show you what we're doing with Azure and actually give you that full automated MDM enrollment experience as well. And then Azure is going to be the next one we support, but like I said, Google Identity, Ping, One Login, we already have those working in the lab, so we should be very quickly to follow with your hopefully identity provider of choice that you may have. All right, so what we're going to do now, because a lot of people I think are very interested in Azure and what we can do with that. So similar to what we've just done with Okta, we can do this with Azure. We can do this at the login window, and we authenticate against an Azure application. So you go into your Azure tenant, you create a new native application in Azure. You can add users to this, or you can allow anyone in your domain to authenticate to it. You're able to create a manifest for that application, and then set up roles. So this is how we determine whether a user is an admin or a non-admin as we go through there. We support Azure Active Directory and ADFS. So if you're using federated services with Azure, you have that. We also are doing we think are some pretty cool things that we're going to show you right now for system preferences and for other ways of maybe thinking about who's an admin and who isn't on the system. So with that, we're going to go into a quick demo. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to roll back this VM. So if we move out of this and go up here and go to my snapshots. And I'm actually going to roll back to this machine in a never booted state. If you haven't done this before, this is a really good way of testing any sort of DEP enrollment. There's a couple of different ways of using it. You can use AutoDMG, for example, to create a disk image. And then if you're on VMware or Parallels, you can actually give that disk image a serial number. With that serial number in there, when the image boots, it will actually get taken directly into the automated MDM enrollment. So this is a great way of testing it without having to constantly wipe and re-enroll a machine or use, Time Machine or something like that. There's a couple of cool ways of doing that as well from the command line before the machine has actually been booted. So we're going to boot this machine up. It's going back to a Jamf server, and it's going to get the Azure Login window installed in it automatically. Currently on Jamf 10.8, there's a brief delay. We'll show you that here in a little bit. With Jamf 10.9, which is coming out shortly, we already previewed this at the Jamf conference a couple of weeks ago. You can actually have a pre-stage package. So this will be a package, in this case, Jamf Connect Login, that will be installed before the login window actually shows for the user. All right. And then in addition to this, we also have taken some configuration profile to put on there, and then gone through the pre-stage enrollment in Jamf and removed the ability for the user to pretty much do anything. We've removed the ability for them to create an account. So what we're going to do here, we're now in the MDM enrollment. We're going to go down, pick the country that we're in, get prompted for the keyboard. You can see already that we're being asked to enroll in the MDM service. So we hit continue. It's now that this is going to be pushed down. So our package is coming down. We get to pick the time zone. This is the only real question that the user has to answer during this MDM enrollment process, because we've gone into the pre-stage in the Jamf server and prohibited them from doing any of those other operations. So now they're able to come in here, pick the time zone. I'm in New York today, so we'll use that. And then this finishes the setup and allows the package to come down. With Jamf 10.9, you sometimes get a brief pause where the standard macOS login window is shown before the Jamf Connect login window comes up. With 10.9, we give you a way to even get around that. So it makes the experience really, really smooth. The Jamf Connect login installation package, and in this case, you see we didn't even see the other one. All right, so this is our Azure sign-in. This is Jamf Connect login. This preview is available today. Talk to your Jamf rep if you'd like to get a part of it. We've got some testing plans and some other stuff that you can do with it. So this is the Microsoft HRD Home Realm Discovery Tool, I believe is what it is. If you had local accounts that have been provisioned through MDM or something else like that, you'd be able to click on this local auth button and then put in a username and password. Otherwise, we're going to sign you in through Azure, and I'm going to get my Azure account. We're using, in this particular case, Microsoft's passwordless authentication. So I get a prompt on my phone. Now I got to find the Microsoft Authenticator app here. And then I pick this number. And once I pick this number, I don't even have to punch my password into the Mac. Now I go through. In order to replicate the Windows 10 kind of experience, we can allow the user to create a new local password, so they can pick anything they want within your complexity requirements. Or we have another workflow where the user just validates the password that they have inside Azure. All right, so either one can be done here. We're going to create a new local account and create account. And we're now going through the process of setting up a local password. Once this user is set up on this machine, they will have a local password. The fact that we're playing with fire here with a live demo with a beta product, but we'll give this a moment here. So we'll be creating a new local account on the Mac. Once that's there, the password will be based on their Azure password. If you set that up that way, or the password that they just created. The username, everything else is pulled down from Azure. So as soon as we get set up here, we can show you that in the system preferences. So if I go to system preferences, When I created the user, we got an identity token from Azure. That gives me my username and password. If I open up an app that you probably haven't used in a long time, Directory Utility, and I actually look that user up, this is something that we do with all of the cloud identity providers. We'll actually stamp this record with the username from the cloud identity provider. So this makes it very easy for you to go back and associate whoever the local account is with whatever network account they've actually signed in as. We do have some methods for migrating users. So if you do have local accounts that have random names, random passwords, we can actually force you to sign in as an Azure Okta user, and then they will get the option of picking a local account that they want to associate with that cloud identity. At which point they type in the local password. We will then update the local password to be the same as the cloud password, and then we'll also add this Azure or Okta user attribute to their record, so that when you go through scripts, administrative tools later, you'll be able to glue all of this back together and know that, Jay Rennick on the local machine is actually Joel.Rennick in your cloud identity provider. And so you've got an easy way of matching those back up together. We also add a network sign-in attribute to the user record. So this is the last time that this user successfully authenticated to your cloud identity provider at the login window. And we update this every time they sign in so that, again, you can be using scripts and other things. What we are working on for future versions is you'd be able to give us a specific time period, 10 days, 30 days, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, where the user could sign in offline or without network authentication. But if it is past that time, then they would be prohibited from being signed in. So a couple of things that we can do here. You'll notice that I am an admin user. This is because I was set up in Azure as an admin role. If I wasn't that way, I would be prohibited from being an admin. And we live check that with Azure. We'll be adding this to Okta shortly as well. We live check at login whether you should be an admin or not, and we promote or demote the user as appropriate. One of the nice ways of doing this is once you move away from binding to AD and you're into a much more kind of cloud-focused environment, we will allow any IT staff to be able to sign on to that machine. So for example, you may have a new employee orientation where you have 10 or 20 users, you hand out 10 or 20 laptops. You don't really care who gets what laptop. That takes a lot of work. You just want them to be able to sign in. So in this particular case, like I just showed you with an automated MDM enrollment, the user would be able to sign in with their cloud identity and create a new local account. We then have a way of prohibiting any other user from signing in unless they've got a particular group associated with them. And so in this new employee orientation case, if Sally sits down, gets a machine, she can sign in, create a local account, everything's great. Bob sits down next to her, signs in, everything's great. If Sally leaves to go to lunch, we don't necessarily want Bob just getting up, sitting down on Sally's machine and signing in. On his, currently right now, we're not able to do that. With the AD plugin, it won't prevent you from doing that because anyone with AD credentials will be able to actually sign in and get accounts. With Jamf Connect Login, we want to be able to prohibit that only to certain groups that can have a secondary account on that system. And so this may be IT admins or something else that you have in there. So all great stuff. So I'm an admin, but just because I'm an admin doesn't necessarily mean that I have access to all the admin things. And so what we've been doing with Jamf Connect is kind of separating this concept of just because you're in group 80 on the local machine doesn't necessarily mean that you may or may not have access to admin actions. So in this particular case, I'm going to go over here to the system preferences, and I'm going to go click on network. This now brings up a network authentication back to Azure. So again, just because I'm a local admin doesn't necessarily mean that I would have complete access to everything. And vice versa, just because I'm a non-admin doesn't mean maybe I didn't have access to it. So what we can do now, and this is something in preview because we're still working on a couple of the workflows here, but we would like to give you granular control so that individual preference panes, individual admin operations would not necessarily have to be based on whether you're group 80 on the machine or not. All right. So in this particular case, I'm going to sign in as another user, which in one workflow may be a help desk admin, something else like that, that may be doing a remote help session with the user. We want to be able to give non-local accounts access to admin actions. If you're not bound into AD and you don't have that directory service, how does IT get on the machine? Well, one way is to use Jamf Connect Login, and the user would be able to authenticate at the login window and then create a brand new account. So if the user has a problem, they go to the help desk, they hand off the machine, and then as users do, they leave, maybe go to lunch, something else. The help desk would have to know the user's password, or maybe you have a static or at least better, maybe a random password on every machine, but then that help desk agent has to know that password. With Jamf Connect Login, they would actually be able to sign in at the login window with their own cloud identity credentials. So some really, really cool stuff here because they're using their own password, possibly using MFA if you have that as a requirement, and then everything is logged and saved back into Azure, back into Okta, back into whatever your cloud identity provider is, that action has happened. So we make it very, very simple for you to do auditing. So this is pretty cool. This is what we showed at the Jamf conference. And we have this in preview. The login window will be in production first because we're pretty close on that. Just putting a few more finishing touches on it. This, we really want some feedback from you as users, as admins, as to what the right workflow for this is. How can we make this functional and usable without making it more of a pain? And then something that we've never shown really publicly yet, we do have yet another tool. So you're here on the machine. Maybe you're an admin, maybe you're not admin, but you need to be able to do admin actions. And so typically if you're at the command line, you would do something like sudo. Well, we have a sudo SAML command. And we're just going to touch a file in temp. And when I do this, I actually get a SAML authentication up here. I can sign in as my other account. And this is the one that's got the passwordless authentication. So there I'm getting the push. I hit that. I gaze into the phone to activate Face ID. I have now just done a root command, a sudo command here at the terminal on the machine, and used cloud authentication to be able to allow for that. And if I now into the temp folder and I list all this out, so as I pass the hoop over the floating assistant, you can see that we've got a file there written as root, and we've been able to do this. So we're really excited about this because this allows us to have a binary in user context. So that's the sudo SAML command that uses a privileged helper and some XPC communication to actually connect to a binary that's able to do these root operations. So this makes it very simple for us to gate what a user can and can't do. We'd be able to filter on some of the commands. So if you didn't want them using DS edit group, for example, to just do a command and add them into the admin group so they could use the normal sudo command, you'd be able to do that. We also wanted to very simply give a way to help desk agents for when your users reach out to the help desk with a problem, they would be able to screen share, somehow do a remote session with the help desk. The help desk would then be able to get on their machine. And in the case of Microsoft with the passwordless authentication, the help desk agent wouldn't even have to type in the password, since who knows, your end user may be running a key logger or something else. You want to make sure that that password's not going onto that remote system. So in this case, you do the remote screen sharing, you do the sudo SAML and the one command that you need to do. That would then prompt for the authentication through the cloud identity service and then go through there. We've got some various ways with the system preferences, for example. We can cache the SAML token that we get during this authentication operation. So that way the user may not be asked for the password again for a number of days. Or we can make sure that it happens every time. We're also looking at a variety of ways of actually doing an active log back to a logging endpoint. In the case of Azure, for example, they've got Azure Monitor, which allows you to a RESTful endpoint, so you can do an API call. And what we'd like to do with sudo SAML is to use the same SAML token, that we got from authenticating the user, use that to authenticate it back against the logging endpoint. So you've got some non-repudiation. You know that this is the user that just authenticated because I've got their token. So I'm going to use their token now to send a logging statement as to what exact operation they've done. So with that, that's kind of the end of our demo. That's Azure. So if you're interested in Azure, please reach out to your Jamf rep. They'll be able to get you in touch with a system engineer or somebody that can help you out with the demo preview, because we've got that available. And then, like I said, we'll be looking at shipping the Azure Login window in probably the beginning of January timeframe. System preferences will come a little bit after that. Sudo SAML kind of in the same time frame. And then looking at Google ID, Ping, OneLogin, a few others. We've had a few accounts that have approached us with custom identity providers. You may be a larger organization, and if you've created your own in-house identity provider, we'd love to chat, because as long as you can do SAML, OpenID Connect, we should be able to make all of this work with whatever infrastructure that you're bringing. So with that having said, I'm going to look for a couple of questions here that we've got through. Can Jamf Connect be a replacement for Jamf Pro, or do I need both? Good question. Jamf Connect does not bring management. So what Jamf Connect is doing is it's adding in identity features. So this allows the passwords to be the same. This allows cloud identity users to sign in, but it's not bringing configuration profiles. It's not bringing, some of those other security features. It's not able to push packages. Jamf Connect is strictly focused on what previously might have been done through Active Directory, through the AD plugin, through an LDAP service or something else like that. So while you don't need necessarily Jamf Pro as your MDM service, of course, we'd love to have you even further into the Jamf family. But you probably want some sort of management service that can push packages and configuration profiles for this. If the user is a local admin, can they access the Jamf Connect sync password and untick the box, or can this be locked down? So all of the functions that Jamf Connect sync does can be configured through a configuration profile. If it's done through a configuration profile, you can push it through MDM, and the MDM can force that profile and not allow it to be removed. If that's the case, the user, whether they're an admin or a non-admin, will have no ability to change that setting. And in the UI, it'll actually be grayed out from them, so they can easily see that. All right, another question. In student labs, we're currently binding to AD and NFS mounting users, so students get the same desktop. Could create a similar experience with Jamf Login. Possibly. This was not designed necessarily with network mounts, but one of the things that happens here, and this is where we do some of the other pieces of the login window. So we've got a binary. Let me just get a root shell here. We've got a binary called auth changer, and with auth changer, we can actually print out the order of the mechanisms that are being used during an authentication process. So you can see there's a bunch of ones that say Nomad Login Azure on it. These are all the ones that we've put in. In this particular one, this is where the UI shows up that actually allows us to authenticate to Azure. You'll note that some of these have a comma privileged at the end. That means they run as root. Any mechanisms that running as root should not show any UI. So these are all headless mechanisms. And we've got a couple of cool ones here. This is the create user. This is where we're actually creating the account locally after you've authenticated. We have a demobilize option here as well. And this will actually remove a mobile account. So if a user signs in and they're a mobile account, we'll actually go through and remove the 18 or so attributes that make that account a mobile account. So in addition to these that you see here, we also have another one called run script. So in your particular environment where you may have NFS shares that need to get mounted, we would be able to allow you to run a script during the login process. And you could put it anywhere you needed to here. So maybe after the authentication to Azure, but before the system actually authenticates the user. And that's actually done down here, right? So this is the standard Mac OS mechanism to authenticate a user. We don't touch that. Apple's still doing the authentication to the system. And you'd be able to run a script either before or after that would then allow you to mount the NFS shares in whichever way you wanted, perhaps get Kerberos tickets. We've got some ways of passing you the password where we're trying to do this in the right ways. So we want to have a chat about that, where you could actually mount a remote file share, make sure it was up and running before the Finder actually starts, which is down here. All right. We have another mechanism that enables full disk encryption for File Vault. And then we have another one down here that does the keychain add. So we can add the password that you just used to sign into the Mac. We can add that to your keychain so that Jamf Connect Sync and other applications can use it. So can we use Jamf Connect MFA during DEP with an on-prem Jamf Pro? Completely. The MFA is not between the machine and Jamf or any MDM server. The MFA is between your system and your cloud provider. So as long as your DEP systems can reach your cloud provider, everything else becomes very simple, right? And that's one of the reasons why we've gone with a cloud identity, unlike Active Directory, where you'd have to get the user onto the domain, and you end up with a little bit of a chicken and the egg scenario there, where how do I get a brand new system onto the domain to be able to complete this process? So yes, hopefully we make that much, much easier that's in there. There's a question, what is the need for AD if you use Okta for ID management? Absolutely nothing. If everything is in Okta and you live in a world where everything is SAML or OpenID Connect authenticated, then you have no need for an Active Directory domain, and you can ignore that entire section of the Jamf Sync preferences. However, if you still have users that are AD master, or you have a number of Active Directory infrastructure that may be using Kerberos, things like SMB shares, printers, things like that, that may have a little bit of problem. So all of that in there is why you would want still to have those Kerberos tickets, but by no means is that a requirement. All right. So there's another question in here. I mentioned earlier we're working on some ways of kind of locking out a user if they haven't authenticated often enough. And there was a question about would an authentication on a VPN, but maybe not at a login window, be able to handle that. And that is one of the things that we're looking at, is how can we tell that the user has authenticated back to your identity provider sometime, but not necessarily at the login window. Because otherwise, many Mac users may go weeks, if not months, between signing in at the login window, where they may want to then be on a plane or something else like that. We want to be able to provide for that. Another thing to keep in mind here is that we are not currently working at a screen lock. So the only time you'll see the Jamf Connect login process is when you're actually sitting at the login window. If you've just gone to the screensaver, you've left your machine for a minute and then coming back to it and going through there, none of that has changed, and we're not in that process. So your Apple Watch, your Touch ID, all of those pieces still work exactly the way that you would expect them to, because we're not in control of the screen lock. We're only at the login window there. So with that, we're about out of time, but wanted to thank everyone very much for joining us. This webinar is being recorded. We're doing another one this afternoon. We'll take the best of both of them and we'll put them up online. So if there's anything that you didn't get here during this conversation, if we didn't get to your questions or something like that, we'd be more than happy to follow up with you later through your Jamf rep. So with that, thank you very much. Please enjoy your day, and very interested in hearing what your needs are around cloud identity. As you can see, we're moving pretty fast in this space. We want to be very agnostic, both with management and with identity providers. You've probably already paid a lot of money for one, so we want to make sure that we can work with that and do those things. So if you've got ideas of stuff that you'd love to see, we'd love to hear them, because like I said, we're putting in a lot of cool features into here and trying to make your lives easier as admins, and of course the users' lives better from the experience and things like that. So thank you all very much, and hopefully we'll be talking to you pretty soon when we've got even more cool things to show. Thank you.